A routine stop, a flash of metal, a decision made in seconds. But when the cuffs clicked shut, Sergeant Calloway had no idea he wasn't just making an arrest. He was sealing his own fate. Because the woman in front of him wasn't just another suspect, she was his boss. A cop's worst nightmare, arresting the wrong person. And Sergeant Calloway had just made the biggest mistake of his career. The sun sits high in the sky, beating down on the quiet streets of Brookfield, a well-kept neighborhood in Ohio. It's the kind of place where sidewalks are lined with perfectly trimmed hedges, morning joggers move in rhythm, and police patrols are routine but rarely necessary. Sergeant Brian Calloway cruises through, one hand on the wheel, the other resting lazily on the radio. 20 years on the force, and he tells himself he's seen it all. Tough, direct, no excuses. He believes in his own version of justice. And in his eyes, people who don't belong in certain areas always warrant a second look. Up ahead, he spots her, a black woman, mid-40s, toned, confident stride. She jogs at a steady pace, earbuds in, lost in her own world. Expensive running shoes, sleek athletic gear. She looks like she belongs, but something about her unsettles him. Maybe it's the fact that she doesn't glance in his direction. Most people at least acknowledge a police cruiser when it passes. She doesn't. Maybe it's the car she jogged past, a silver Tesla parked in a driveway. Did she just come from there? Is she casing houses? Or maybe it's nothing at all. Still, Calloway pulls over. The tires crunch against the pavement as he steps out, one hand on his duty belt, not reaching for anything, just making sure it's noticed. His eyes lock on her as she slows down, yanking out one earbud. She's breathing hard but controlled, wiping a bit of sweat from her forehead. If she's nervous, she doesn't show it. Something wrong, officer? She asks, still catching her breath. Where you coming from? His voice is steady, edged with that quiet authority he's mastered over the years. She blinks, glancing up the street before answering. Home. Just getting in my run. Where's home? She tilts her head slightly, something shifting in her expression. Couple blocks down. Got ID on you? There it is. The moment shifts. Her face hardens just a fraction. The casual ease in her posture tightens. For what? Calloway lifts his chin slightly, studying her. He doesn't like being questioned. Just need to make sure everything checks out. She exhales sharply, hands on her hips. You pulled over to stop a woman jogging in broad daylight because you think I'm a threat? He doesn't say yes, but he doesn't say no either. She huffs a short laugh, reaching for her phone. You know what? Let's just call someone who actually enforces the law correctly. Calloway steps forward, not aggressively, not violently, but deliberately. Ma'am, I'm not going to ask again. Show me some identification. Her fingers tighten around her phone. He notices, and in his mind, the situation has officially escalated. What he doesn't realize is that he's making the biggest mistake of his career. The street is still. The only sounds are the occasional rustle of leaves and the faint murmur of distant traffic. But for Simone Daniels, the world has narrowed down to the man in front of her. The officer standing too close, the weight of his stare pressing down like an unseen force. She knows this routine, knows the pattern, knows what happens when someone like her challenges someone like him. But she also knows her rights. I'm not required to carry ID while jogging, she says. Evenly, Calloway shifts, adjusting his stance. That's so. Her voice is calm, unwavering. But to Calloway, it's defiance. He glances around. The street is mostly empty, just a few houses with drawn blinds, one or two people in their yards, subtly watching. No one stepping in. I'm investigating suspicious activity, he says, voice clipped. What activity? Calloway pauses. He didn't expect to be challenged like this. You were running past a home with a high-value vehicle in the driveway, he says, as if that justifies everything. Simone laughs, but there's no humor in it. You mean the Tesla? So now jogging past a parked car is a crime. Calloway's jaw tightens. You're refusing to identify yourself. I'm refusing to be harassed. That word, harassed, it burns in Calloway's chest. His authority is being questioned in broad daylight, in front of strangers. He steps closer. You're resisting my investigation. Simone's expression hardens. I'm resisting nothing. You're abusing your badge, and you know it. Her hand twitches near her phone. Calloway doesn't think, he reacts. He grabs her wrist. It happens fast. The shift from words to action. One moment, she's standing her ground. The next, he's pulling her arm behind her back, metal cuffs flashing in the sun. "What the hell?" she shouts, struggling against his grip. "You're under arrest for obstruction," Calloway says automatically, like he's reading from a script. People stop and stare. A man on his porch pulls out his phone, recording. A woman across the street watches, frozen in place. "You're making a mistake," Simone grits out, fighting to keep her voice controlled. Calloway tightens the cuffs, ignoring the eyes on him. "You should have cooperated." Simone exhales sharply through her nose. Her pulse pounds in her ears, but her voice is steady when she speaks. "You don't even know who I am." Calloway doesn't care, but he should, because his world is about to come crashing down. The steel of the cuffs digs into Simone's wrists as Calloway presses her arms behind her back. Her chest rises and falls, controlled but tense. She's been here before. Not in these exact cuffs, not in this exact moment. But she knows this feeling, the weight of power being abused. Calloway doesn't see the problem. He sees a win. Another suspect neutralized. Another moment where he gets to walk away feeling in control. But the world around him is shifting. A small crowd is forming. A man across the street keeps recording, phone steady, capturing every second. A woman near her mailbox calls out. She wasn't doing anything. Calloway ignores them. He presses his radio. "Dispatch, I have a 10 to 15. Female suspect refusing to identify herself. Sending for transport." Simone laughs under her breath. "You really think this is going to go your way, huh?" Calloway doesn't respond. He doesn't need to. The law is on his side. Or at least, that's what he's always believed. Then another voice cuts through the air. "Excuse me, officer. What's going on here?" A man in his 50s, well-dressed, an air of authority that doesn't match the rest of the bystanders. His suit jacket slung over one shoulder. His eyes flick from Simone to Calloway. Calloway doesn't flinch. "Sir, please stand back." The man doesn't move. Instead, he looks at Simone, then at the cuffs, then back at Calloway. "I asked what's going on." "She was being uncooperative," Calloway says, his voice firm, but slipping just slightly. The man tilts his head. "Uncooperative?" Simone exhales sharply, shaking her head. "He stopped me while I was jogging. Asked for ID. I told him I didn't need to carry one. Now here we are." The man looks back at Calloway. "You arrested her for jogging?" She refused to comply with an investigation. The man's expression darkens. "That's so." Calloway feels the shift. The weight in the air is different. He notices the way people are watching. The way the man standing in front of him isn't afraid. Then, a black SUV pulls up. Tinted windows. Unmarked plates. The kind of vehicle Calloway knows belongs to someone with pull. The driver's door opens. Out steps Captain Ronald Briggs, Calloway's commanding officer. And he looks pissed. The crowd parts just slightly as Briggs strides toward them, eyes locked on Calloway. The tension is thick. Calloway straightens, trying to maintain his stance of control. But something feels off. Briggs stops a few feet away, glancing between Calloway and Simone, still in cuffs. His jaw tightens. And then he says two words that hit Calloway like a sledgehammer. Calloway blinks. "Uncuff her." Briggs' voice is firm, unwavering. Calloway hesitates, his grip tightening on the cuffs out of sheer instinct. This doesn't make sense. His boss is ordering him to release a suspect. Briggs steps forward, his expression unreadable. "I said uncuff her." Now, something sinks in Calloway's gut. He releases the cuffs, stepping back as Simone rubs her wrists, the red marks standing out against her skin. The street is eerily silent, but the weight of the moment is crushing. Briggs turns to Simone, his voice laced with regret. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" Simone exhales slowly. "I'm fine." Calloway's stomach knots. Something is off. The SUV, the way Briggs isn't just mad, he's furious. His mind races for an explanation, but the answer comes before he's ready. Simone meets his gaze, her voice sharp as steel. "My name is Chief Simone Daniels." Calloway stops breathing. The words hit him like a sledgehammer. He arrested his boss. The shift in the crowd is palpable. The bystanders, the cameras recording, every eye locked on him. The man in the suit watching with barely concealed contempt. He feels exposed, every decision laid bare in front of them all. Briggs' voice slices through the suffocating silence. "Do you even know who you just put in handcuffs?" Calloway swallows. "Sir," she refused to identify herself. Because she didn't have to. Briggs steps closer, his voice low and cold. "And you damn well should have known that." Simone watches him carefully, her tone controlled but cutting. "You didn't know who I was, and that was all it took for you to see me as a suspect." Calloway clenches his jaw, the heat rising to his face. He has no answer. Nothing he can say will make this right. She steps closer, lowering her voice just for him. "You put your hands on me. You humiliated me. You were ready to throw me in a squad car over nothing. And if I weren't in this uniform, we both know how this could have ended." Calloway's breath is shallow. His fingers twitch. She isn't yelling. She doesn't need to. The truth is heavier than any raised voice. Briggs straightens, shifting his gaze back to Calloway. "Sergeant Calloway, you're relieved of duty until further notice. Hand over your badge and gun." The words feel unreal. Calloway's pride wars with reality as he unclips his badge, placing it in Briggs' outstretched palm. Then his sidearm. His hands feel empty, weightless, but the crushing weight of the moment suffocates him. Simone watches him for a long moment. There's no triumph in her eyes, only disappointment. "Take a long, hard look at yourself, Sergeant, because after today, everything changes." Calloway says nothing. There's nothing left to say. As he steps away, the cameras still roll, the crowd still murmurs, but what haunts him most isn't losing his badge. It's the realization that today, he didn't just make a mistake. He exposed himself. And there's no coming back from that. Calloway's hands rest on his lap, fingers slightly curled, as if they still remember the cold weight of the cuffs he placed on her wrists. His badge and gun are gone, his career hanging by a thread, but it's not the loss of his position that unsettles him the most. It's the gnawing realization of what he's done. The air inside his car feels thick, suffocating. He finally looks up, staring at the neighborhood in front of him. The same quiet street, the same neatly trimmed hedges, the same houses with their drawn blinds and still doorways. But now, everything feels different. The world hasn't changed, but something inside him has. Near her SUV, Chief Simone Daniels stands tall, speaking to Briggs. Her body language is measured, controlled, but Calloway can see the fire in her eyes, the quiet fury just beneath the surface. The bystanders who once stood in uncertain silence now watch her with something different. Not fear, not suspicion, but respect. Calloway sees it too, and that's when it hits him, when the weight in his chest grows unbearable. The realization slams into him like a punch to the gut. She was never the threat. He was. For years, he's told himself he was fair, that he acted only when necessary, that his instincts were sharp, unshakable. He was a man of the law, a man who did his duty. But today, those instincts betrayed him. Today, he got it wrong. And now, it has cost him everything. Briggs finishes his conversation and walks toward his vehicle, leaving Simone standing alone for a moment. Then she turns. Her eyes find Calloway through his windshield. She doesn't look away. The silence between them is heavy, charged with everything left unsaid. There's no anger in her gaze, no satisfaction, no triumph, just disappointment. A quiet, unshakable disappointment that cuts deeper than anything else. She exhales, slow and deliberate, then shakes her head once. Just once. A simple, final verdict. Then, without another word, she climbs into her SUV and pulls away. Calloway watches the taillights disappear down the road, but he doesn't move. His grip tightens on the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. His mind races, replaying every second, every misstep, every moment where he could have stopped, where he should have stopped. A year ago, he wouldn't have questioned himself. He would have found a way to justify this, would have told himself she was just another person making a scene. He would have moved on, convinced that the law was on his side. But now he isn't so sure. Power isn't about the badge. It isn't about the uniform. It's about how that power is used. And today, he wielded it like a weapon, without thought, without restraint. How many times has this happened before? How many people have been thrown into cuffs for nothing? For jogging past the wrong house, for standing in the wrong place, for simply existing in a way that made someone like him suspicious? How many times has he been wrong without even realizing it? This isn't just about one bad cop making a mistake. It's about a system that allows mistakes like this to happen over and over again, unchecked, unchallenged. And today, Calloway isn't walking away with his power intact. He's walking away exposed. So the real question isn't whether he'll wear that badge again. The real question is, when will this stop? And more importantly, who's willing to do something about it?